conjugating verbs in the present tense in Spanish. You should have already watched the first video that identifies what infinitive verbs are and generally how we conjugate, what we conjugate. All right. One of the things that's going to be super important to us is knowing our subject pronouns. All right. And have them set up here in a little chart. And this chart should be familiar to you. We already know these. We have yo, tú, él, ella, usted. Those are our singulars. This side of the chart is always singular. This side is always plural. And then we have our nosotros, ellos, and ustedes. So, conjugating in the present tense. First things first, there are 3 types of verbs in Spanish. There are only 3 types of verbs. Okay, and all infinitive verbs in Spanish end in AR, ER, or IR. And infinitive verbs, as you know, are the original form of the verb before you start switching it up for a subject in a sentence. We use these endings to identify or group the verbs together. So, for example, dibujar, which means to draw, would be an AR verb. Comer, which means to eat, would be an ER verb. And escribir, to write, would be an IR verb. And that's all based off the fact that they end in either one of these 3 endings. So, how do we conjugate verbs? Basically, there are 4 steps. First thing you're going to want to do is identify the type of verb. And again, we already talked about that's by the AR, ER, or IR. Okay? Once you know what type of verb it is, you don't really need that AR, ER, or IR anymore. So the second step is going to be to take that AR, ER, or IR off, take that verb ending off. So here's an example. We have our verb ordenar, which means to tidy up. I look at it, I go, okay, it's an AR verb, don't need it anymore, get rid of it. So that leaves us with orden. Orden is called the stem of the verb. And knowing this term, the stem, is important. The stem is what's left after you take off this AR, ER, or IR verb. And then all of the verb forms, regardless of the subject, who or what is doing the action, is going to use this stem, orden. Okay? Step 3, we need to know what our subject is so we know how to switch up our verb. And subject could be any person or thing. John, nosotros, yo, tú, él, ella. And again, the subject of a sentence is the person or thing that is doing the action that's associated with whatever verb you're conjugating. And then the last thing we do is you're going to add an ending that matches that subject to the stem. And remember, the stem was what's left after you take off that AR, ER, or IR. So, for example, if the subject were yo, we'd say yo ordeno, I tidy up. If the subject were tú, it would be yo, tú ordenas, which is you tidy up. So we have our orden, and orden is the same, but these little endings are different based on the subject. Okay? So let's talk about our little T-charts, which are going to identify the different endings for us. Okay, las terminaciones, or the endings. These are going to be the endings for AR verbs. And again, this T-chart is what we looked at first, right? This is our singular side. This is our plural side. And in terms of order, we're always going to put the subject pronouns in the same order in these T-charts just to kind of keep them organized as we're learning them. So if the subject is yo, your ending is going to be o. Your subject is tú, your ending is as. If your subject is él, ella, or usted, any one of those 3, you're going to use a. The nosotros or nosotros uses amos. And then finally, ellos, ellas, and ustedes, that plural you or they, is going to use an. So those are your AR verb endings that we'll add on to our stems if our verb that we started with ends in AR. Then we have our ER verb endings, right? 3 different types of verbs, 3 different verb ending charts. And again, here are our endings: yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, and ellos. So we have o, es, a, hemos, and en. And our last type of verb are IR verbs. Okay, and these are going to be our endings. O-S-A, imos, and N. Now, hopefully you noticed that the ER verb endings and the IR verb endings are virtually identical, with the exception of the nosotros form, where with IR verbs it's imos, IMOS, and ER verbs it's EMOS. Otherwise, the O, the S, the A, and the N all remain the same. So those are all the pieces. You have your 4 steps, and then you have your 3 T-charts that have the different endings that we could choose. So let's just go through this process real quickly. So if we started off with John and dibujar, right? This is John, subject, and this is to draw. But we want to say John draws. So the first thing we're going to do is go, what type of verb is this? Step 1. Okay, it's an AR verb. We know that because the sentence in AR. Cool. We don't need the AR anymore. We're going to take that off, which is going to create our stem, which is dibuj. So this is the stem we're going to use. Next thing, step 3. What is the subject? The subject is John, okay, which we could replace with he. So we're, oh, poop. Our subject is John, which we could replace with he. If we're talking about one person, a he statement, the verb ending is going to be a. We put it all together. We end up with John dibuja, which is John draws. So we started with a subject and an infinitive verb. And after our 4 steps, we can now say John draws. And that's how it works.